Welcome to the Airport Airside Safety Induction DVD. The objective of this safety induction is to explain the general safety requirements placed on all those who undertake work airside and to raise awareness on specific safety issues.
This DVD will explain all the basic safety information you need to know.
The presentation is not intended to cover all of your duties on the airfield. You will need specific training from your own company or department for this. By the end of the DVD, you will recognize and understand the key facts on airport safety, have an understanding of the hazards and risks that are involved in an airside environment and the control measures that are in place to safeguard against these. All activities which take place within aviation are governed by various types of legislation. For more information, contact your employer or your visit sponsor. There are also local rules and regulations specifically relevant to airports, and these may vary from airport to airport, so make sure you're aware of what's relevant to your airport. These include airport bylaws, aerodrome health and safety manual, and operational advice notices. So if in doubt about any policies or procedures, contact airport operations. And remember that all these regulations, rules and procedures are there for your safety and the safety of others. This is why we have to comply. And if you break the rules, you may be liable to prosecution. Definitions. Before you can understand the rules and regulations that apply airside at an airport, you must first understand the definitions used to describe the different areas. The apron, more commonly called the ramp. This is the part of the airport which is provided for the stationing of aircraft, for the embarkation and disembarkation of passengers, the loading and unloading of cargo, and for the parking of aircraft. Manoeuvring area. The part of the airport designed for the takeoff and landing of aircraft and for the surface movement of aircraft, but excluding the apron and any part of the airport which is designed for the maintenance of aircraft. The movement area. The part of the airport provided for the surface movement of aircraft, which includes the apron, the manoeuvring area, and any part of the airport set aside for the maintenance of aircraft. Airside. The part of the airport from which unrestricted access is available to the aircraft movement area, and from which unauthorized personnel are excluded for safety reasons. The aircraft maintenance area. The part of the airport used for the maintenance of aircraft. This includes the hangar area and the maintenance taxiway. The critical part. The zone into which access is restricted for security reasons. The zone is limited to those who are authorized as having a business need to have access and who have passed through a DFT-approved security check. Goods, aircraft and vehicles which enter this area must also pass through a DFT security check. The airside area is a restricted area, and only holders of a valid ID are allowed into airside areas, and then only after passing through an airport security check. The security check involves passing through a metal detector, and all metal objects, bags and coats must be X-rayed. Once you're in an airside area, you must have the relevant ID card for that area. It must be on your person at all times, clearly visible and worn at chest height. You should challenge anyone, regardless of their role, if they are not displaying a valid ID card, and report any breaches of security immediately. PPE. It's a requirement that high visibility clothing be worn at all times when operating outside in an airside environment, and that it should be kept clean and fastened at all times. If it becomes dirty or is blowing behind you, then it becomes ineffective. It's also recommended that hearing protection be carried at all times and worn whenever the environment becomes noisy. You should always also wear any other PPE equipment that's provided by your employer.
Smoking is not permitted in any airport building or airside unless a designated area is provided. Mobile phones must not be used whilst driving or in a fueling zone.
Laws relating to drink driving and drugs apply to all areas airside, and if you contravene these laws, you'll be denied airside access. The airside areas consist of many different operating areas for aircraft, vehicles and pedestrians. Pedestrians are only allowed on the airside roads and apron, commonly known as the ramp, but you should always stay on the designated footways, unless you're authorised to move from them and you've received specific training to do this. You can walk on pedestrian walkways, including road crossings. But be aware in particular for moving vehicles, especially in congested areas. You can walk onto aircraft stands, but only if this is part of your job and you've received the correct training. Until you have received specific training, you must only approach an aircraft under escort. You cannot walk on taxiways beyond double white lines, unless you've received specific training. When working outside on the apron, stick to the designated walkways, unless you've been authorised otherwise. Don't cause a hazard to aircraft, and remember that pilots have a limited field of vision, so be mindful of that. Never ever approach an aircraft with its anti-collision lights illuminated. Whenever you're on the apron, always be on the lookout for specific trip hazards, such as chocks, GPU cables, tow bars and spilt liquids. Never step over an obstruction, always walk around it. A particular hazard around aircraft are the fueling hoses and bonding cables. If you accidentally run over either a fueling hose or a bonding cable, immediately contact the fueling operator. And remember, it's best to keep out of the fueling zone altogether, unless it's absolutely necessary that you should be there.
Working at height and manual handling tasks must only be undertaken by persons who have received suitable training.
There are several non-aircraft hazards on the ramp, and these include complacency. Never think that you know everything about operating airside, or assume that other people around you will stick to the rules and regulations. Distractions and lack of awareness. Always be aware of what is happening around you. Lack of familiarity. The airside ramp is a busy and dangerous environment to be in. You need to be sure where you are going and plan your activity to minimize risk to yourself and others. Conditions can change rapidly. Ignorance. Never try to carry out operations for which you have not been trained, and never ignore regulations. Pressure. There is always pressure to get the job done, but this must not be at the expense of safety. Another non-aircraft hazard on the ramp is lack of experience. Statistically, young or new workers lacking experience are far more likely to be injured as a result of their activities airside. Always follow your training and use common sense. If in doubt, stop and ask.